Maybe we should just read. Maybe we should just read. Welcome to Hayes Reviews. Hello and good evening. This is Nick, creator of Hayes Reviews. We're back for another live stream. We're going to continue reading from Between Two Ages, a book by Brzezinski. It's been pretty good. This is part 13. We've got quite a ways to go, but we've made it to the fourth part of the book, which is all about America. Fuck yeah. We got Frank in the chat. We've got an American in the chat who keeps making the same joke on every single live stream. It gets funnier every time. Good to have you here, Blake. I just need to go and do some button pushing over on Rumble because it's the live stream's not coming through over there. And seeing as we've... Oh, it is. It is coming through over there. Fantastic. I don't need to push any buttons. And I can get back to the introduction. Good stuff. Good stuff. I was going to say, seeing as we abandoned Odyssey, I want to make sure that at least Rumble's working as well. But it looks like it is. So if you can see me over on Rumble, please let me know in the chat. Tammy's here. Well, I'm glad you're here, Tammy. I'm glad you made it. We were talking earlier about your schedule change and how it's a little difficult for you these days to make it to the live streams, but you're here, so that's good news. Welcome, everybody. This is going to be our usual Friday night live stream session. I'm going to talk for a little while, and then we're going to read from the book. I'm enjoying this one. I've got a little bit of news to share with everybody, which is that I am this close to getting an audio-only Hayes Reviews up and running and out there and released into the wild, wild lands of the internet. It's almost ready. I've been working on the introductory sort of music. What it's going to be is the sections of the live streams where I'm reading from the book. So there's not going to be any preamble rambles. There'll just be the reading of the book plus whatever commentary I happen to make as on the fly as we're going through the book. This keeps the episodes a little bit shorter, more digestible, and it encourages people who want the preamble rambles and the spontaneous introductory meanderings to tune in live. So it kind of differentiates the two. And the other reason I'm doing it like that is because a very, very kind viewer is helping me by ripping the audio, separating them and editing it and chopping off the intro and the outro so that we can use them in podcast form. The other thing I've got to do is reach out to the musician whose music I'm using for the intro and the outro and say, please, pretty please, can I use your music? I think there's a good chance he'll say yes, because he's a person who I know personally and have known since I was in secondary school. He's actually my old music teacher. And he's, I don't think, relying on sales of his music or royalties or any of that sort of thing. In fact, I'm not even sure if this music is out there anywhere. He was making CDs, pressing them at home, burning them and printing out the inserts and putting the CDs together. And so it's not something that's all over the place. So I'm hoping he says yes, especially since I've already used it on 3 episodes and it sounds pretty good. I like the way it's come out. And if he says no, I don't really have a backup plan. I'll have to use my own music, but I've been going through it and I don't think any of it is really suitable for podcast intro, outro. It's just my feeling. I think my music's more suitable for outro, which is why, as you probably just noticed, today's live stream has a little different format. We went straight into the countdown theme tune. Maybe we should just read, and then I will play you out with some of my little guitar ditties. And this way we get straight into the broadcast itself. People aren't sitting there twiddling their thumbs going, what the hell's all this about? All there is some acoustic guitar music, and we never know how long it's going to be till there's actually somebody on the screen to listen to. So it takes away some of that ambiguity and hopefully will aid in audience retention. So that's what I've been doing. What have you been doing this week? I hope you've been having a good week. The weather's changing, it's getting colder, and then it's getting warmer, and then colder again. It can't seem to make its mind up, but maybe that's something to do with the weather modification technologies that are out there, with the spraying that is going on above our heads day and night, with some of the chemicals and substances that have been put into our environment, not by us, of course, but by the world controllers, by the corporations, the overlords, the people who set themselves up as masters and commanders of the societies that we are born into. And they are also the designers of the systems that we're born into. And so this is why we like to get together every Friday night and read books written by these controllers and these strategists and these designers to find out what it's really all about. What is actually going on here in this place called Earth? Is there something we can learn about history, about what's coming up in the future by diving into these old books? And I think this is a really good example of why the answer to that is yes. Diving into old books is actually a pretty good place to learn about the future, surprisingly, and especially this one. It is certainly not at all been any kind of disappointment. We've learned a lot. Zbigniew Brzezinski, he was very high up in the American political establishment, but also in academia. He was teaching at some of the highest, most prestigious universities. He got lots of primetime television slots to give his thoughts on a variety of events. And really all that is to tell people what to think. When they trot out these talking heads to give their commentary about the latest event, whatever it might be, that's really to imprint on you what you are supposed to think about it. Okay, the experts came out, they did the analysis, and this is the conclusion, and you can download that conclusion, then you can go to work the next day and you can repeat it. You can argue with the person who watched the news channel that does the other side, the left or the right. If you're watching Fox News, you can go to work and argue with the person who watches MSNBC, for example. Or it might be in England, the BBC versus Channel 4 News. I don't even know what news channels are out there these days. It's been so long since I watched them. But that's what the purpose of these kind of media outlets is. It's to give you your opinions and your ideas and your talking points to keep you on the straight and narrow, meaning the path that has been laid out in front of you, the one that is guiding you towards total digital technocratic slavery and control over every aspect of your life, your children's, your grandchildren's, and your great-grandchildren's lives, right? That is the path that is laid out ahead of you, and it's made tempting and easy and alluring and fascinating and entertaining. It's very entertaining, so that you'll keep going along with it and not think too much about it and not lift your head up to look left or look right or wonder what's that way or what's over there or even what's back there, right? It's just this march forward with your head down, staring at your glowing rectangle. And I came up today with a handy acronym that I thought I would like to share with everybody because I was doing a bit of technical troubleshooting earlier in the week, doing a little bit of back-end stuff on the community with the development of the Haze Reviews podcast, as I said, and cleaning up some of the software that I'm using and the systems. And I came across this acronym, which was BSOD. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I guess it's BSOD, B-S-O-D. And I had to look it up because I didn't know what it meant. And it means blue screen of death. So the reason I'm looking up BSOD is because in the event of a BSOD, my recording is not going to save tonight. So I'm really hoping and praying that we're not going to get any BSODs. We've been pretty good with this laptop. We haven't had any BSODs. We've had some cracklings on the line. We've had some lag. We've had some skipped frames due to GPU overloads and this kind of thing, but no BSODs. So far, so good. So I was thinking about this acronym BSODs, and I was thinking about the fact that we're really, as a species, pretty much doomed because of these glowing rectangles that everybody is so fascinated with and can't help but stare at, and the I was watching people when I was walking today. Just it's so automatic. I watched two girls who were going separate ways, and they were on the corner of a street, and they were about to go the other way. And they sort of said their goodbyes, gave each other a little hug, and then they turned around, and it was like a symmetrical, choreographed dance. They turned around, and as they were turning away from each other, the hand went in, and the glowing rectangle came out, and then they were both on them within seconds of ending the conversation. Now, at least they didn't have them in their hands while they were having their conversation with their friends, so that's good. we always got to look for the silver lining. But it was amazing to see this, and I started thinking about these glowing rectangles, and I was thinking, I'm going to keep hammering this phrase, in case you haven't noticed, glowing rectangles, because I think we need to sometimes change the language, change the vocabulary that's being used, try and reframe what's happening, and rather than saying smartphones and devices and phones and all these other words that are given to us, right? Why don't we call them what they are? They're glowing rectangles. And then I was thinking, these little glowing rectangles, they're actually so damaging. They're helping us, they're leading us down this path to annihilation. And if it's not physical annihilation, it might be the annihilation of the soul, the annihilation of our humanity, of our conscience, of our memory. All these different aspects of what makes us are being gradually eroded and annihilated. And I thought, these little glowing rectangles, they're like glowing rectangles of death. And I thought, yeah, that works. G-R-O-D. These little grods, okay? So put your grod down and pay attention, because tonight we're going to do some reading. This is a workout for your attention span. So please refrain from fondling your grod while the broadcast is happening. We're going to be with you for the next sort of 2 or 3 hours. Surely you can restrain and refrain yourself from picking up that little grod. I know it's alluring. I know it's tempting. I know it's got access to all the novel information that you could ever possibly desire. But it's killing you. It's harming your mind. It's taking you away from reality. And that's not good in the long term. So give yourself a little break. Put your grod on silent. Maybe put it on airplane mode. Maybe, you can get this. Maybe turn it off. When was the last time you turned your grod off? And don't talk about grods as dying. Oh, my grod's dead. Because they don't die, because they're not alive. They're glowing rectangles of death, and we need to see them that way and talk about them that way. And I would even go so far as to say sometimes you just got to slap them out of people's hands when they're not expecting it, preferably strangers, and then just carry on walking like nothing happened. And if you can kind of slap it out of their hands so that it flies into the street and then a car, goes over it and just smashes it into smithereens, even better. And that'll take a bit of practice. So you can get started on that this weekend and report back to me. That's your homework. And then next Friday, report back to me and let me know how that goes. Lisa is here, and we've also got Melissa. Lovely to have you both in the chat as well. And it's good. People are filing in slowly to the back of the classroom, which is nice. Take a seat here up front. We're a friendly bunch. We are just looking to learn from Zbigniew Brzezinski, the master strategist. So what are we here? What have we been learning so far in this book? We're over halfway. We're about 2/3 of the way through it. Yeah, sorry, that's a bit too close there. We're about 2/3 of the way through it. You can see that. And Zbigniew Brzezinski is a Marxist. He says that essentially Marxism is a humanist way of looking at the world, and it's revolutionary, and there's really been nothing like it. And if only we could just do it properly. But unfortunately, we can't do it properly, and the places that do try tend to fail because of things like nationalism and things like racism and things like dogma and power-hungry minorities of people who, once they establish the power for themselves, they don't want to give it up. Power's nice. It feels good. It's good to have the luxury and the comfort and the control over others, or so we are told, and some of us believe to be the case. I don't think power appeals to everybody. In fact, I'm not even sure what the ratio might be when it comes to power and its appeal. 50-50, I don't know, maybe less. I feel like it's probably the minority who want the power and the control. And something about that is a betrayal, or something about that tells us that these people are insecure and scared and fearful of their own security, and that's why they want the control. Think about control freaks in your life who you may know, people who need to know everything and have it all planned and locked down and can't deal with any deviation or unexpected happening or occurrence. This desire and this need and this want for control, it doesn't come from a place of benevolence and love and security, right? It's quite the opposite, I think. So I don't think it's in everybody. I don't think everybody is yearning to be able to command the deaths of millions of people or hold in their palms the fates of entire nations and societies. I don't think that's everybody at all. In fact, I think that might be a minority of people. And I think a good book which backs this up is this one here, Political Ponerology. So I mentioned last Friday, we're reading this now in book club. We have just finished chapter 2, which was called Some Indispensable Concepts. And it's quite academic, it's quite rigorous, and it's quite scientific. And it gives you a sort of non-theological, non-spiritual account of evil, how it rises up, how it takes over societies and countries. Apparently, it all starts with those small acts of evil that people let slip and take part in every day, and it snowballs from there. I'm looking forward to reading more of that book. That's going on in book club. Consider joining us for that discussion. We've got a good little study group. We're meeting every Tuesday to discuss the book. We're meeting every Wednesday to read the book, and then we're having a week or 6 days to reflect and refine our thoughts and ponder, do some extra reading, get our ideas together, look up the new words, because there's quite a lot of new words in this book. And then meeting on Tuesdays to talk about what we read. It's turning into quite a fruitful and edifying place to be for me and for the people involved, I think. So far, so good. So yeah, consider joining us in the book club, the Hayes Reviews book club. It's over on School. The link's at the bottom. You can see it scrolling around. Not that one. It's coming up over there very soon, but you'll see it. But yeah, Political Ponerology gives you an account of how this small minority of people crave power, they want control, they maneuver, they manipulate, they lie, they deceive, and they're at an advantage because of that. Because unfortunately, being a good person puts you at a disadvantage when it comes to the dealing with bad people. Who'd have thunk it, right? If you are good and honest and decent and straight shooting, and you are reliable and you are not out to exploit or manipulate, then you're at a disadvantage against those who are. And then unfortunately, those who are out for doing all that kind of nonsense, well, they're working very hard. They're working very diligently. They are shimmying up in the organizations. They are maneuvering themselves into positions of power and influence, and then they're designing the systems that the rest of us have to live in. So if you're in the UK, you might be familiar with all the stuff that's going on at the minute with regards the budget, right? Rachel Reeves, our finance czar, minister, I don't know, something or other. She keeps doing these budgets and they're all terrible. And every budget that any government would come up with would be terrible because it's a socialist system, and that is predicated on hoovering up as much cash from the people who work as possible. And they have this system of preventing any revolution taking place or reform taking place by hoovering up this cash from the people who work and doling it out to people who don't. And thereby you have this natural divide and conquer where a group of people are taking the handouts, and they want the handouts to keep coming, and they don't care where that money comes from. They're not bothered if you're working and getting taxed on your extra assets, if you're having to do 2-3 jobs, whatever it might be, to keep the bills, keep the roof over their head, to, buy the food. They don't care because they're getting stuff given to them for free, quote unquote free. And so these people, they get into these systems, and because these systems are so old, and because they have been designed by psychopaths and manipulative evil people, and because they've been around for longer than any of us can remember, Really trying to tear them down is quite a staggering idea. I can't imagine what it would take to overturn and tear down some of these systems. I really can't. The thing that you hear quite often is that, well, if we all just withdraw our consent and just stop using their systems, they'll magically disappear and disintegrate. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think powerful groups who have established such insane levels of control, wealth, and luxury will just allow their slaves to put down their tools and walk off the plantation. It would be nice if it were that simple, but you can't go anywhere without using their systems. You can't get the things you need without using their money, their one eye, right? The system of debt and usury and control, which most people are enslaved by, and not only enslaved by, but worship like it's a religion. Because to get out of it, you would have to set up systems of trade and barter and exchange, and that is tricky and arduous, and a lot of people don't have anything to trade or exchange or barter with because we're in the technotronic era, right? Most of us don't have real world skills that we can barter and trade with. Most of us are slapping keyboards and pushing pixels all day because we've been maneuvered into this service economy where all the production has been offshored to other areas. And so it's very hard to see how we withdraw our consent and stop using these systems. Of course, there are means by which you can make progress. You could start growing herbs with a view to eventually grow your own food, right? But start small. You can start putting your grod, turning it off. You could downgrade your grod, and instead of having a glowing rectangle of death, you could have, I don't know, what could we call it? A G-bod, a glowing brick of death. You know, these brick phones, these old Nokia ones that are not compatible with the latest NSA spy apps and software that you're forced to have on the latest and greatest smartphone grod devices that we carry around. So that's another thing you can do. So there are little ways and means by which you can resist and push back and move yourself in the direction of more freedom and more control over your life. But on the whole, like on aggregate, are we going to get out of this? Are we going to, quote unquote, wake up enough people to really withdraw so much consent and attention and effort and energy from the system that it matters to the people? I can't see it happening because they're just importing more people from other places who come here for various reasons. One of those reasons is the free stuff that I talked about earlier. And if they're getting their free stuff, they're not going to kick back against the system, you know? They're not going to want to bite the hand that feeds them. So who knows? It's a tricky, messed up, crazy situation. And I don't have the answers. My answer is, hey, let's read books on the internet. So, you know, don't follow me looking for solutions to the world's challenges. But I do know one thing, and that is learning about what we're facing and learning about exactly what we're going through and what the situation is if it's not step one, it might be step 2 or 3. There might be some earlier steps like caring. You got to care. And you've got to notice that something is up or feel that something is up. And then at some point early in the journey, you have to go, right, I need to know exactly what's going on here. And so we dive into books written by psychopaths who have ridiculous, crazy, evil sigils on the front of cover of their paperbacks. and we look to learn from them because these characters don't write these books for us. They write them for each other. And I think these are ways for them to signal to each other and to communicate to each other like, hey, I see the world the way you do. I'm up for perpetuating the control system. I'm up for moving up within the system for continuing the exploitation and the enslavement of the human race en masse. And not only that, I'm going to work to help you make this system even better, even more efficient, even more complete and total. right? I think that's a fair assessment of what Zbigniew Brzezinski did in his life. So what's he doing here in this book? I'm glad you asked, but before I answer that, I'm going to take a sip because my mouth's getting a bit dry. Right. What's he doing here in this book? Well, he's giving us, and he was writing in the 60s. This was published in 1970. He's giving us an account of different systems. He's telling us that communism was a system. He's telling us why it didn't work out, why it's never going to establish itself internationally. It's got failings, it's got problems baked into it, which means that it will never succeed in its goal of taking over the world. And that is the goal of communism and by extension socialism. They have internationalism baked into them from the start, and it was always the plan that these things would extend everywhere. Or was it? In my opinion, even though in their documents and their meetings and their conferences and their writings, they do talk about this internationalism and taking over the world and spreading it to other countries and freeing the workers of the world, I think it was always just an experiment. I think it was an opportunity for them to test out the system, see if they could establish a certain amount of control, see if they could wipe out how many people they could wipe out without losing that control. And it was kind of a test run to gather some data, like an iteration, before they updated and rolled out the next stage in the system. And we've talked about it quite a few times in this series, this merging together of the capitalist system with the communist system for this third system, which we're heading into now. We've also spent quite a bit of time on the channel reading and thinking about Fabian Freeway, which was an excellent book we read. Little hint and a teaser, that's probably going to be the first book that I release in the podcast format. So if you are not familiar with that, or if you want to refresh your memory, it is worth going back to and reading it again. I was listening to the earlier chapters recently, and there's a lot of really good stuff in there. And when you go back and revisit these books in light of what you've learned since, it helps. So I know it's time consuming and it can be difficult to carve out that time to do this learning, but it does help. So Zbigniew, he's telling us about communism, how even though it wanted to take over the world, it wouldn't be able to, because there were problems in the way, which I touched on a little bit. And he gave us this kind of sweeping here in part 3, which we just finished last week, this sweeping analysis of communism, how it was taken over by Stalinism, how Stalinism was basically a aberration, just a mutation of Marxism that never should have happened, right? Then the bureaucratization of boredom, how everything fossilized, and not fossilized, that's the wrong word. Ossified, is that the right word? It just became stuck. It killed innovation. It killed creativity, because the little ruling clique at the top of the communist system in the USSR, they wouldn't allow any challenge to the ideology. And this is how you end up with these amazing situations where you can't just ask questions and tell the truth and challenge things and make fun or jokes about things, because it's a very serious matter, and it becomes this like religious extremism that takes over people, and the adherents to it, the ones who enforce it, are the ones who benefit from it. So they have a little bit of power, and they may be drunk on that power, and they like exercising it over other people. They reinforce it. They kidnap people. They beat them up. They slap them around the head. They do all manner of things, put little bugs in their phones and spy on them and record them and all that kind of stuff. Still goes on today. Well, I mean, everybody's doing it today, like with the grods. That's what the grods are for, right? But when the ruling oligarchy at the top becomes so wedded to this ideology that they have the muscle to enforce this blanket ban on questioning it, that's when you end up with things such as the Gulag Archipelago and other accounts of just the insanity, right? They know we're lying. We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying. They know we know that we know they're lying, and on and so on, right? So that was a bit of an account of that. Then he talked about the future, the Soviet future. That bit was really interesting because he gave these different scenarios. And then we saw Brzezinski, the master strategist, at work. And we saw a glimpse into how these elite, they war game out all these different scenarios because they know how people are going to react and they know what they want to do. And so they think, right, we've got this destination. This is where we want to take people. Let's look at the different paths by which we could accomplish this. Now, there's brute force. There's the Fabian socialist, tortoise, slow, gradual method where you do it all the long term. And there's everything in between. You can do it suddenly and quickly. You can do it slowly and gradually. It involves propaganda. It involves mind control. It involves false flags. It involves terrorism. It involves violence. It involves quiet, gradual changes and upgrades to the law and the legislation, and conditioning people to accept it and expect it and to see it as inevitable and natural and organic and evolution, right? All these calm, warm, fuzzy words that make us give in to this idea of inevitability. So that section was really good because we saw him describe, I think, 4 scenarios or 5 scenarios that could happen in the future of the USSR. And then the one he settled on was it was a mix. It was a combination of 2. And I think it was technocracy and the fixed oligarchy. He said the most likely thing that's going to happen is the oligarchy remains in power, but they use technology to control people. And he said in this book that that was his prediction for the USSR. But come on, I think that was his prediction for the world, right? So alternative paths. Here we go. This was the section. He did this bit here on alternative paths, and he talked about oligarchic petrifaction, pluralist evolution. He ruled that out because he says there can't be any pluralism under communism because it's a rigid, fixed ideology. Technological adaptation, where you would have cybernetics and computers for social control. So he said it's going to be a mix of oligarchic petrifaction and technological adaptation. Don't you think that's kind of what we have? The same families, the same ruling families have been in control for so long. Hang on, let me grab my my evidence. Right, you got books such as Ancestors of American Presidents, and you can pick a page at random. A bit further to the back where you have these trees, really nicely drawn trees. I like the handwriting. I like that they're handwritten as well and not printed. But you can see that these presidents, the 27th president, the 13th, the 30th, and the 6th, and the 2nd, all have the same ancestor. These are bloodlines. These are families. These are the same people. The petrified oligarchy, but not petrified in the sense of scared, because I don't think they are scared. I think they're very confident and comfortable and content in where they're at. Or maybe not. Maybe they are scared, and that's why they need to roll out such unprecedented levels of control and over everybody. But they've been in control for a long time. The same bloodlines, the same families, the same groups, and they change their names and they rebrand themselves, and that's what makes it very difficult to track. But then you can get a little book like this one by Gary Boyd Roberts, and you can dive into that and learn a little bit about it and see that it's true. Or you could get a book such as I'm not going to be able to get it down because it's up there under a pile of other stuff, but it's The Lineage and Ancestry of His Royal Highness Prince Charles, Prince of Wales. I will get this book though. This is The Sustainable Prince by Joan Vion. She quotes from the lineage and ancestry of the Prince of Wales, and let's find that quote right here. His Royal Highness Prince Charles' breeding is the most important in the world, she says. He is heir to the world's greatest position that is determined solely by heredity. In the introduction to Paget's monumental work, The Lineage and Ancestry of His Royal Highness Prince Charles, Prince of Wales, Paget writes, His Royal Highness is cousin or nephew in varying degrees of all the 6 wives of King Henry VIII. He has many descents from the Royal House of Scotland, France, Germany, Austria, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Spain, Portugal, Russia, and the Netherlands. In addition to Charlemagne and William the Conqueror, he numbers amongst his ancestors such historic characters being the operative word, as King Alfred the Great, King Harold, who was slain at Hastings, Llewellyn the Great, Prince of North Wales, and on and on and on. And then down here it says, links through marriages or a common ancestor can be found to such diverse people as Genghis Khan and 12 presidents of the United States of America. And that's where she mentions Burke's book, Presidential Families of the United States of America. So that's another book, as well as this one, as well as the Paget book, and as well as Gary Boyd Roberts. So these people, they've been in control for a long time. So we already have that aspect of the system in place, right? What did he call it? Petrified. It was oligarchic petrifaction. So we already have the petrified oligarchy. Petrified of losing control. Scared to death that we might just rise up and tell them to bugger off and leave us alone. Which is why they have to keep encroaching, put more spy devices in our lives, push more of us to tolerate zero privacy, to tolerate ID, digital ID, biometric systems of surveillance and control, to tolerate digital money and this whole blockchain ledger system where every transaction is visible, trackable, traceable, and databaseable, if you will allow a neologism. But the oligarchic petrifaction is already here. And so now it's just a case of adding to that the technological adaptation. And I think that is what we are about. We're on the cusp of it. You know, we're in the 11th hour. I listened to a Mark Passio presentation recently. He said it's the 11th hour, the 59th minute, and the 59th second. I think he said 59.99999th second. Like, that's how close we are to this thing being switched on. For example, Substack just announced that it would require UK users to provide proof of age and ID to align with the UK's online nonsense bill that they brought out recently. So that might be Substack. That might be gone now as a platform, as a viable platform to publish and communicate, right? But that is the value of reading these kinds of books, you know. So back in the 70s, you read about the plan that we're living through here in 2025. And that is oligarchic petrifaction plus technocratic control. So after this section on the Soviet future, he went into the section we just read last week, which was sectarian communism. And that was kind of, basically he was just talking about how China's version of communism will never take over the world, and how the USSR's version of communism will never take over the world. And that there needs to be a sort of, the communism is not one thing because it's different in every place. And it tends to just, as we just mentioned, it tends to ossify, it becomes fixed, it becomes rigid, it becomes ideologically stale and stagnant, and it can't keep up with the times, it can't keep up with the changing technology, it can't keep up with development, with industry. And so that's why the system needed to be abandoned, it needed to be allowed to wither and die and collapse. But not before we had a good old Cold War, right? Not before we had the tension and the fear-mongering and the stress of that for however many years that went on for. But it's been let go of now because controllers have learned what they need to learn, and they're ready to implement the next phase, the next stage of the system, which is perhaps what we're going to learn about in this upcoming part, which is part 4 of the American transition. So we did start this. We got about 3.5 pages into it. He talked about the American experience. I relabeled that the American experiment. But he did say on the next page that I thought he did say something about, oh yeah, contemporary America is the world's social laboratory. There you are. I'd turned 2 pages instead of 1 there. So if you're in America, you're being experimented on. I mean, if you're anywhere, you're being experimented on. But he's telling you that if you're in America, you're being experimented on. And he was talking about the unique challenges that are happening in America, the post-industrial society, its effect, there not being any work or any jobs or any means by which to trade and barter, etc., the liberal democracy, and the redefinition of the American system. And he led us into the Third American Revolution. And that's the section that we read last time. I can't remember that much about this section, actually. I must have been tiring a little bit. He said, the Third Revolution is changing the basic institutions and values of American society. As was also the case with the preceding revolutions, there's resistance, violence, anxiety, and hope. Hope for who? Exactly. Who's hopeful? I don't know. I know quite a few people in America, and I don't think any of them are particularly hopeful. You could be wrong. Oh, and he was talking here about the academic scientific conglomerates around LA and San Fran, and saying that they are the new frontier industry. So he's describing the technotronic era, the onset of this technotronic era, the rise of Silicon Valley, the rise of the big tech corporations, the data gathering, the harvesting, the kind of things that are covered in books such as Surveillance Valley and The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff. Now, Surveillance Valley, Yasha Levine, absolute must read. You have to read this book. It's not hard to find. It's widely available. Grab a copy and read it. And if you don't want to read it, you can join my online community where I have read it for you, and you can catch those replays and listen to me read it instead, right? If that's what you prefer, which I know some people, they can't focus on a book, they don't have time, they can listen while they're doing other things. I've made that available for people inside the community. It's essential reading. So that's what he's talking about in this Third Revolution, this America's Third Revolution. He's saying that, all right, the era of manufacturing goods and exporting them, and that's all over. It's over. Remember Yuval Noah Harari, right? The age of free will, that's over. He's telling you that the industrial era in America is over. You're in the technotronic era now. It's all data and AI and chips and software. And what does that mean? Well, I think that's what we're going to find out in tonight's reading. So I think that's a good place to leave the introduction and to pick up on Zbigniew Brzezinski's discussion of a technologically induced revolution. So I hope you enjoyed that little off-the-cuff, spontaneously improvised introduction this evening. We've got Celine Lyon and Doris as well in the chat on YouTube. Good to have you both here. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's good indeed. So, before I get into the book, just remind people, you can see going across the bottom of the screen here, the different ways you can support the show if you feel able to and moved to do so. I would appreciate it very much. I love doing this. I would love to do this full time. I would love to do more readings and analysis and studies. I would like to get proper, comprehensive resources out to people, and not just AI junk that has been regurgitated. Like last week, I used an AI summary to as the intro to the video, and I just felt a bit like dirty and guilty afterwards. I really did. And I've been watching as this series goes on, the numbers have been dropping a little bit. That's usually what happens when we get this far into a book. People, they can't keep up. So they're like, screw it. They go and look at other things. So I don't mind that. But last time I was thinking, maybe that's something to do with it as well, that using this sort of AI garbage. And I think there's use cases for it. I do. Just like spell checker on your word processing thing, or the grammar suggestions, This is all the same sort of technology, right? We don't care about the little red wiggly line. Nobody's like, hey, that's not written by a human. Nobody's insisting you leave your spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes in there because that's more authentic and human, right? People accept a certain amount of software suggestions and tailoring to their digital output, but it's kind of like the line has been drawn now that you don't really have to do anything yourself if you don't want to. And it's a very alluring, deceiving kind of temptation that we've all been given. I can't imagine what it's like for students, people at university. They got to write essays and read books. Like you can just not read books or write essays now during your studies. Not that your studies are probably worth anything anyway in this day and age. We know about the underground history of American education. We know about John Kleinsek's book, School World Order. So it's all being automated, and these tools are being given out so that people don't learn and can't think and can't write and can't articulate ideas and connect them together and describe them. So, I felt a bit guilty and a bit bad, really, about using that. But, and I'm not making excuses, I'm just explaining my situation. I don't have time. I would love to review the video and go back through the book and make a nice little cheat sheet that I could give to people that I've written. But it takes time. And when you've got a full-time job, you've got a full-time child, and then you're doing this on top in the spare time, it's a labor of love, and it's something that I feel called to do and I love doing. And I wish I could do it professionally. And I can only do it professionally if people offer their support. So please consider the different ways of doing that. allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews has everything you need, and you can join the community. That is probably the best way, because you get more for your support if you join the community. And I've revamped it. I've done. Maybe I'll show you a little bit about that. Shall I show you a bit? Okay, I'll show you what I've done in the community. You might like it. So if we go over here. This is what you'll see if you go to the community link, right? You see book club. It's a private reading community from the creator of Hayes Reviews. And you can see the price now is $7 a month. But that is not the only price. If you click start free trial, there's 3 different tiers that you could pick. And each one of them has a 1 week free. So you can, no money down, come join us. See the resources, see what's available, enjoy it and use it for a week, and then leave without it costing you any money. The lowest tier gets you replays, and you can join the forum and leave messages and talk to people and ask questions and have a textual interaction. The middle tier is going to get you on the group calls that we have every week. These are Tuesdays and Wednesdays, as I mentioned earlier in the call. And then the top tier is you get one-on-one calls with me. And you'll have a link. You'll be able to book in with me, talk to me about whatever you want. I will help you to the best of my ability with whatever it is that you've got going on. These are going to change. There will be more things added to them as time goes by. But this is where we're at the moment. So as I said, you can try them for free at no risk. And once you get in, you can come over here to, not the members, to the classroom. And you can see all the different things that are available. So if you join at the lowest tier, this is what you get. For 7 measly little fake dollars. You get a private group chat, you get the whole Continuity of Control series, and you get all these replays of the book club. So we're doing political pornology at the moment, but you get First Global Revolution, Surveillance Valley, and 4 Arguments for Illuminated Television in their entirety straight away. You don't even have to talk to anyone or do anything to access those, which is pretty neat. And then political pornology, you'll get the replays of the readings, YouTube and Odyssey links. You'll get the cheat sheets that I've made with AI. Sorry about that, but I'm a bit strapped for time. I'm a one-man show with some extra resources as well. So you will get to follow along with the book and the readings. And if you upgrade, you then get to join us on our Wednesday and Tuesday calls. So you can sit in on the reading live and chat to other people who are doing it, much as we're doing right now, only it's private for the community members. And then Tuesdays, that's where the real good stuff happens. you can join our discussions. So it's one thing to take in all the information and to learn and expose yourself and open your mind to this information, but it only really embeds in when you start to talk about it and discuss it with other people. That's what these Tuesday meetings are for. We get together and we have a good sort of 3 hours of discussion, of back and forth, comparing notes and learning together in a group, which makes it all the more entertaining and fun and enjoyable, if I do say so myself. So that is what is on offer inside Book Club. How about that? Pretty good stuff, eh? And then allmylinks.com/Hayes reviews for everything else. And I'm done with my little spiel. So yeah, please support if you can. I'd appreciate it very much. If you can't, no worries. Hang out. Enjoy the reading. We're going to get into it right now. It's time. Let me move things around a little bit. So, Celine Lyon says, most of the youth can't even do simple mental arithmetic. I know. The youth are lost, and it's sad. Particularly being the father of one very tiny member of the youth, myself, I do give this a lot of thought, and it's creepy. But I'm hoping if he sees me reading books as he grows up, he might also take an interest in reading, and that will help. With regards to the mental arithmetic, I'm not sure how I can demonstrate that in order for him to think it's cool and start doing it himself. Maybe I'll just ban calculators from the house. Oh, we got Heidi as well. Good evening, Heidi. Nice to see you. So let's continue with the pace and thrust of progress. But what is progress? Who defines it? And is it always a good thing? It's one of those words where we're kind of we assume it's a good thing. We assume that more progress is good always in every situation, and but what are we progressing towards? That's the question, and who's planned this route? So, continuing. The facts reflecting change in America are familiar and therefore need not be related in detail. There is, first of all, the massive expansion in the sector of society concerned with science and knowledge. This means a significant growth, more rapid than that in the other sectors, in the number of scientists, college students, and of course the institutions that nurture them. There's a little footnote. The scale of that change can be illustrated by a few figures. College enrollments increased by 45% in the years 1964 to 1969. In 1965, more than 50% of all adults were high school graduates. In 1900, the corresponding figure was only 1%. The number of teachers increased from about 1.3 million in 1954 to about 2.1 million a decade later. The number of engineers grew from about 500,000 to almost 1 million. An OECD study of American science estimates that between 1963 and 1970, the scientific population of the United States will have grown from 2.7 million to 4 million, with doctorates increasing from 96,000 to 153,000, and those in engineering from 10,000 to 17,000. In 1869 to 1870, roughly at the beginning of America's Industrial Revolution, the number of all degrees awarded by institutions of higher learning was just under 10,000. In 1889 to 1890, it was 17,000. And then by 1963 to 1964, it was 614,000. In the past 20 years, investments in research and development have increased 15-fold, expenditures in education 6-fold, while the GNP has tripled. Wow. That is probably why everything is so messed up. There's so much more government indoctrination going on. And those figures sound good, but quite a lot of the time we get wowed and bedazzled and mesmerized by big numbers. And just because the number goes up doesn't necessarily mean the progress is good. Like Frank says, progress requires change, but all change is not necessarily progressive. Yes, and change, that's another great word. Change, progress, these are the kind of sloganeering words that get thrown around by the marketers, by the Bernaysian type social engineers. And we just assume that it means for the better, it means good, it means something benevolent or beneficial, but it's not the case at all. So reading all these numbers going up, it shows you how this went into overdrive, the control of people's quote-unquote education, which is really just indoctrination. They've been ramping it up steadily for over 100 years, well over 100 years. And yet people will point to this and go, isn't it fantastic that we have all this schooling available and all these no child left behind type of policies, when all it is training. It's Pavlovian, Skinnerian, behaviorist training to condition people to go to work and pay their taxes and be good, happy, little, oblivious slaves. But let's continue. As a result, the university has emerged as the creative core of the massive learning communications complex, the source of much domestic and international strategic innovation. In social prestige and influence, the university is displacing the equivalent institutions of the more traditional America, the church, and big business. That is a very interesting little tidbit. So universities, and look at the name as well, the word universe. University, universe, one verse, like singing from the same hymn sheet. It always makes me think of that, the universe. Get everyone singing from the same hymn sheet. It's standardization of thought, which is standardization of behavior by proxy. That's what it's all about. And it's telling you that church gone, business gone. So forget about entrepreneurship, forget about your moral behavior as provided to you by your relationship with the Creator. That's over. Now it's all about the universe city, the city of the one verse, singing from the same hymn sheet, standardizing thought and behavior for everybody who passes through the doors, and getting you in debt. Don't forget about that. It's not free. You also get the privilege of having a massive albatross around your neck that you got to spend the rest of, or a large portion of the rest of your life, paying off. So who could turn that deal down? Continuing. The emphasis on science and learning goes hand in hand with the rationalization of techniques and the introduction of new teaching, managerial, computing, and communications devices, which are altering established practices and changing the methods used to store and retrieve accumulated knowledge. A national information grid that will integrate existing electronic data banks is already being developed to pool the nation's accumulated knowledge. Okay. A national information grid. So he's talking about the internet, right? I think. Back in 1970. Let's look at the footnote. It's number 6. What's he referring to? So this is chapter... No, it's not. It's part 4. And it's footnote 6. Go back. So he's just referring to, I guess, a magazine, Television Quarterly, spring 1968. So a national information grid, pooling the nation's accumulated knowledge. Increasingly, swamped libraries may soon find relief. Oh, those poor libraries, swamped with all the people going down there to read books. Oh, we need to do something about. We need to do something. Somebody think about the libraries and save the libraries. Increasingly swamped libraries may soon find relief, much needed relief, by shifting to the ultra microfiche technique pioneered by NASA, by which a 2,000-page book can be reduced to a transparency smaller than the average book page. This will make it feasible for every small college to possess a library inferior to none. Though American educational theorists disagree about the degree to which the educational systems can adapt the new techniques, their debates reveal the extent to which technical assimilation, rather than philosophical issues, dominate their thinking. Yeah, so technical assimilation is much more important than the actual wisdom of rolling out these systems, Philo, Sophia, love of wisdom. Forget about what's wise, forget about whether or not it's wise to roll these technologies out. Just roll them out. Just give them to people, right? And we're kind of, there's a whole movement online now about smartphones and, it's damaging our children and we should ban them in schools and make sure that nobody can use them before the age of 16. My little shiny metallic hat way of thinking is that the damage was already known. It was studied long before these things were given out. You just use the example of chatbots, right? The Eliza effect. Weizenbaum, he coded the chatbot, he called it Elijah, and he was testing it on people in the 60s. And that knowledge was rolled into the development of the internet and all the software and services and websites, and now AI is here and that's been unleashed. And it's never by accident. It's never we thought it was going to benefit everybody and help everybody, and and it just caused all this damage that we couldn't foresee. But here he's telling you that the technical assimilation is the important thing here. That is above and beyond any other sort of moral consideration or ethical consideration. Continuing, contemporary business puts a similar premium on knowledge and the rapid adoption of new techniques. This requires the pooling of resources and collective organizational efforts, the frequent and systematic retraining of top personnel, and a close tie with the centers of knowledge. Linear programming, a systems approach to problems, coordinated teamwork, and a highly sophisticated attitude toward human relations and labor psychology are becoming the dominant features of managerial processes. According to Lawrence Appley, chairman of the American Management Association, the number of managers involved in professional management societies and working with management consultants has risen from 10,000 in 1948 to over 600,000 in 1962. Excuse me. So, management, right? These are the people who, they don't want to do anything productive. They don't want to do anything skilled. They want to manage. It reminds me, again, I've been listening to Fabian Freeway, but it reminds me of the Fabian Socialists. They didn't want to work. They didn't want to be productive. They didn't want to learn skills and put something in. They just wanted to sit back and manage everybody else, manage the resources. It's the same thing about communism. It's the management of things. It's the perfectly managed, the scientifically managed society. So it's this improving, studying, this what's the word that I'm trying to get at here? Refining of the management of everything. It's technocracy, in a word. That's what he's telling us here. And you've got these management consultants. It becomes a new job that didn't exist before. But, in the 1930s, we get technocracy. Then this sort of fetishization, if that's a word, of management and what it is to manage people and all these methods of management. And, change management is something that the company I work for offer change management. And all change management is getting people to do stuff that they don't want to do. Or these changes are decided at the top. And then how do you make sure that the people below adopt this new way of doing things, right? So it's social engineering, and but they call it change management. management. They should call it progress management, right? But it's just manipulation. It is just all the mind control and social engineering techniques that go into behavior modification that have been well studied and well known for a very long time. But here you can see it coming into vogue. It's being formalized as a discipline and a job that that is very well rewarded, or at least was back in the day. Continuing, operationally, business less and less resembles a political hierarchy or a personal fiefdom. It is increasingly similar to a systematic scientific undertaking that not only produces what is known, but systematically seeks to explore what is to come. Wow. So business is increasingly similar to a systematic scientific undertaking. The footnote to this is massive, but we're going to read it. There's a quote. The new style of dealing with the future has no accepted inclusive name, but the names of its more highly developed techniques have become familiar in the last 10 years to most businessmen, government officials, military officials, scientists, and technicians. The techniques themselves, which are apt to be called systems analysis or systems planning, are now widely used both with and without the help of computers. Cost-benefit or cost-effectiveness analysis is a major ingredient of the new techniques. This involves ways of arraying ends and means so that decision makers have clearer ideas of the choices open to them and better ways of measuring results against both expectations and objectives. Among characteristics of the new pattern are these. 1. A more open and deliberate attention to the selection of ends toward which planned action is directed, and an effort to improve planning by sharpening the definition of ends. 2. A more systematic, advanced comparison of means by criteria derived from the ends selected. 3. A more candid and effective assessment of results, usually including a system of keeping track of progress toward interim goals. Along with this goes a market-like sensitivity to changing values and evolving ends. 4. An effort, often intellectually strenuous, to mobilize science and other specialized knowledge into a flexible framework of information and decision so that specific responsibilities can be assigned to the points of greatest competence. 5. An emphasis on information prediction and persuasion rather than on coercive or authoritarian power as the main agents of coordinating the separate elements of an effort. And 6. An increased capability of predicting the combined effect of several lines of simultaneous action on one another. This can modify policy so as to reduce unwanted consequences, or it can generate other lines of action to correct or compensate for such predicted consequences. That's from Max Way's The Road to 1977, which was in Fortune magazine in January 1967. So, really, they're talking about technocracy. They're talking about the absolute total tracking, tracing, and databasing of everything, gathering all that intelligence, gathering all that information, monitoring it, and then using that to drive decision making. And you see this all the time in the corporate world of kind of like database decisions and better driving better decision making through analytics and you know, cost value management. That's another one. I went on a training course for value management. And if you ever look at buildings that are really ugly and very basic and very just functional, you're looking at value management. Because the first thing that gets dropped is always beauty. The first thing that gets dropped is like, well, do we really need to make it look nice? Like, no, we don't. We just need to make it work. And that's value management. And so it's about managing everything and stripping it all away. And I think ultimately the logical next step is to automate it. And kind of that's another aspect of the era that we're barreling into, is the automation of things. And now you've got people like, for example, Peter Duke. I was browsing his website earlier because he's got a new thing out, which is like Peter Duke books. In fact, shall I just show it to you? And you know what I'm talking about. And I like books. You might have You might have figured this out at some point that I like books, right? And so Peter Duke has gone and built the Duke Report books. And it's in the beta, so it's not finished. But here it is. And I think it's pretty good. Look at what is on here, right? You got Anglo-American Establishment by Quigley. You got Deliberate Dumbing Down, Milner-Fabian Conspiracies on here. Hidden History. You got Two World Wars and Hitler. We've been talking about that in the Telegram chat today. War is a Racket, Smedley Butler, and on and on and on, right? There's loads of really excellent books here listed. Why, though? What's the purpose? What is the function of this website? Well, if you let's choose an example. Let's go to Fabian Socialism, and we'll see a bunch of books about it here. Fabian Freeway. Okay, we were talking about that. We'll have a look at that. What have you got? Oh, it's like a kind of overview with all the lessons and these different headings. And guess who's written this? Have a guess, because I can just tell by looking at it. These paragraphs are almost the same length every time. You got the heading, the layout. This looks to me like it was churned out by a piece of software. And I think that's what it is. This whole website, right? You can go to books on 9/11, for example. And there's a list of real books here. That's a good one to pick. Black 9/11. I've got a copy of that. So it gives you the ISBN, which is good. You can track it down. Gives you the author. But it's it's just this soulless, heartless AI summary, which could be useful, right? But it's automation. Okay, this is how many people are not going to read it because they think they can just go here and read this instead, and then they know. Now, you might use this to decide whether or not to read it. That could be a valid use case. But is this going to lead more people reading it or fewer people reading it? I don't know. But he's got all these different sections on the side here. Christianity. Let's have a look at that. I don't know any of these books. Moving on. He's got some, what is he? Oh, sorry, James Corbett, books that James Corbett recommends. Superclass. George Orwell. Technocracy Rising. Technopoly. Double Cross System. Hate Inc. Shadows of Power. That's all about the CFR. James Perloff. Globalization of Poverty. And on and on and on, right? So it's a great place to go if you want to, if you're looking for new books to read. Oh, First Global Revolution's there. Fantastic. And then here you go. But you don't need to read the book for yourself and make your own mind up. Dig out those quotes, right? Because here's a handy dandy little AI summary for you. So I'm not trying to, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this. I'm not trying to put Peter Duke down because it's clearly a phenomenal resource. If you want to look at some books that look up some books that deal with things that actually matter, right? But the bit that I don't like is if you go to book podcasts, he's got this section, normies, start here. All of these are AI generated podcasts with human sounding voices. There's a man and a woman. I was listening to, I can't remember which one I clicked. It was a man and a woman though. And it was this sort of, hey, wouldn't it be weird if the whole world was run by this small oligarchy? And the guy comes in and he says, yeah, I mean, that's quite an unusual idea, you know? And these they have, if you haven't listened to them, they're worth listening to just to see how you feel and you react to it. But my point is automation, okay? It's coming, it's here to the point where Peter Duke, I don't even know if he's reading any of these books himself or if he's just grabbing the PDF, running it through GPT, then running it through another program and saying, make a 20-minute podcast on this book and uploading it. I don't even know if he's listening to any of this stuff. And I don't know what he talks about on the stuff that he does do himself, right? The podcast appearances and whatnot. So I'm just using that as an example of something I saw recently that that pertains to what we're reading about tonight, which is automation, this adoption of technology without considering the wisdom of whether or not we should actually dive into it. And the fact that, look, when you can do what I've just showed you, you don't need as many people around. You're not going to need as many human beings now that you've got these little AI companions that you can wear around your neck, right? I heard you, Melissa, talking about that fairly recently. These little AI companions that you can wear around your neck, and they record everything that happens to you, and then at the end of the day, you can have a little debrief. Oh, hey, AI buddy, how was my day? Tell me how it was. I don't want to have to interpret my own day for myself anymore. You tell me about it. And then eventually it's going to be like the film Surrogates. There's a Bruce Willis film where people don't leave their homes. They cast their consciousness into a robot, and the robot goes to the places, their meetings and to work and this sort of thing. And that's only one step away from just you having a clone that goes and does stuff for you, or some robot that goes and does things for you. And it's sad, right? Because it's dead, and it's soulless, and it's stale, and it's empty, and it's devoid of the spark of divinity, and the mark of the creator is not in that stuff. And I can understand why people hate interacting with it so much. So, what is to come? More and more automation, more and more gathering of all data and all information at all times, less and less privacy, less and less spontaneity, less and less human creativity. And so, if you have any of that stuff in you, which you do, hopefully, then you got to protect it. You got to look after it. It's like a little flame that you have to keep lit by feeding it fuel and protecting it from strong gusts of wind and torrential downpours and all that sort of thing, right? You've got to exercise it and keep it alive. Otherwise, it will be bred out of us. And I think that's the goal, to make these perfect automaton human beings. But anyway, let's continue with the book. That was a massive aside. Apologies for the tangent there. In summarizing, continuing, the social transformation wrought by technology, Daniel Bell listed 5 key areas of change. 1. By producing more goods at less cost, technology has been the chief engine of raising the living standards of the world. 2. Technology has created a new class, hitherto unknown in society, of the engineer and the technician. Okay, that's interesting. Think of them as a new class. You might call them technocrats as well. Or you might call them the managers, right? There's the new class. There's the book, The New Class, which is all about the bureaucrats. That's what I think is the real new class. Number 3, technology has created a new definition of rationality, a new mode of thought which emphasizes functional relations and the quantitative. Yeah, so it's extremely left-brained in the sense, in the meaning of, like, if you got to be able to measure it, quantify it, you have to be able to break it down into numbers and figures and data. Otherwise, it's just wishy-washy nonsense, and we've got no use for it. Number 4, the revolutions in transportation and communication as a consequence of technology have created new economic interdependencies and new social interactions. And number 5, aesthetic perceptions, particularly of space and time, have been radically altered. To these should be added the new sense of self-awareness induced by society's increasing ability to see itself in the mirror provided by television, buttressed by increased reliance on statistical analysis, and intensified by a systematic preoccupation with managing not only the present, but the future. So, again, this is like ascribing to the bulk of humanity what I think actually best describes this psychopathic, controlling, dominating elite. It's not most people who care about the statistical analysis and who are taken over by a systematic preoccupation with managing the future. You know, we're molded and shaped and indoctrinated into that way of thinking, and manipulated and managed into that way of thinking. But I don't think it comes naturally. And this idea that the television is a mirror, that is such a deceit, because it is not a mirror. The television is literally a mind-controlled device. It's a mirror just reflects back what is. It doesn't manipulate and alter and mess with reality in the way a television does. The television is not simply reflecting back what is. The television is actually programming people's brains and behavior to change how they act and to change society itself. Okay, it's not just a benign, inactive reflection. That's a real gross oversimplification and misdirection. And if you need more information about that, then you got to go to 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. I don't think there's one live stream I get through without mentioning that book, because it really is that good and profound and important. And it applies to all screens, not just the television, but it's must reading. Continuing. Moreover, for perhaps the first time in its history, American society is beginning to acquire a national outlook on such matters as race and poverty. Hence, inadequacies in one sector are no longer a matter of relative indifference to another region or class or minority. All this prompts a more deliberate, less haphazard effort to identify social inadequacies, and it thereby links more moral outrage at social injustice with a more operational preoccupation with improving overall social performance. Man's inhumanity to man was certainly easier to accept in a setting in which human relations were distant, class interests were compartmentalized, and social conscience was rarely aroused by visible injustice. The consequence is not only undeniably rapid progress in many areas and increased social awareness of existing failings, but also the intensification of old problems and the posing of new challenges. The economic base that determines the average American's material lot has expanded in recent years at a pace that makes the American per capita GMP increase at a rate greater than that enjoyed either by other advanced societies or by those that are becoming so. This change has been accompanied in the years 1959 to 1967 by significant and even accelerating shifts in income distribution and in patterns of employment. There's a couple of tables there on the screen to back that up. Continuing, these shifts indicate the strengthening of the middle levels of American society, a development not only symptomatic of greater social egalitarianism, but also significantly relevant to the political aspects of the current American transition, on which more later. Well, that middle class is now not needed, as we found out in the Big C of 2020. Middle class is being squeezed. There's really only going to be the super class and everybody else. That's what Chrystia Freeland says in her book, Plutocrats, The Rise of the New Global Super Rich and the Fall of Everybody Else. And the David Rothkopf book as well, Superclass, talks about that, as mentioned, as recommended by James Corbett. So the middle class, that's, we got to get rid of them. Don't need them anymore. They've served their purpose. So continuing. In addition to these overall percentages, note should be taken of the fact that as of the end of the 1960s, Americans owned close to 70 million automobiles. Ooh, big numbers. That 95% of American households had at least one television set. The idea... Yeah, I don't know. That's just a boast that they've managed to get their mind control device into pretty much everybody's home. That might actually be... that one line there might tell you just how many of quote unquote awake people there are, if you want to use that term. I'd be going to the 5% of people who are like, no, we won't want that television device in our house. Thank you very much. I think that could be quite a depressing thing to think about, but 95% of people were like, yeah, we'll have the mind control device. Thank you very much. And they said the rest of that sentence is that over 60% of American families own their own homes. I wonder what that's like today. Despite the indisputable persistence of poverty in the United States, sorry, but the persistence of poverty. Oh, poverty is just so persistent. We're doing our best to get rid of it, but you know, it's really tenacious. That old poverty, just never gives up. Just never gives up. American society is achieving an unprecedented affluence that touches all classes. That poverty besets millions of Americans. Sorry, let me redo that. That poverty besets millions of Americans has been amply documented in recent years, and the majority's indifference to this problem has been at least somewhat shaken. The poverty line was initially defined by arbitrary and very broad approximation as income less than $3,000 per annum for a family of four, or $1,500 for an individual. There is no doubt that such a level involves acute hardship for most, and even malnutrition for many. But even more debilitating is the psychological sense of deprivation in relationship to society's overall wealth. Nonetheless, here too the pace of economic growth, combined with more deliberate efforts, has brought progress. From 1961 to 1969, the group below the poverty line, as defined by the Social Security Administration and taking into account the rise in prices, dropped from 22% to 13% of the population. Moreover, according to the Council of Economic Advisors report of early 1969, if 1961 to 1968 rates in reducing the number of poor persons are continued, poverty will be entirely eliminated in 10 years. Wow. If the 1968 rates are continued, it will disappear in a little over 5 years at a cost of $9.7 billion annually, which is 1% of the GNP and 5% of the federal budget. Well, I'm glad to see that prediction panned out. Give me a second. I'm going to have to blow my nose. For some reason, I've been really snotty today and can't shift it, but I'll mute because, you know, that's the polite thing to do. All right. So, amazing. I'm sure everybody in America is glad and grateful and feeling very blessed that poverty has been eliminated and the overall wealth of the country is being spread out equally and fairly, and that everyone's enjoying their outstanding levels of luxury and comfort and material wealth. Let's continue. Poverty has plagued particularly but not exclusively the black Americans. In 1966, their nationwide median income was only 58% of the median income of whites. By 1968, this had grown to 60%. Blacks are the principal victims of poor housing, poor schooling, and unemployment. How can you be a victim of unemployment? So there's discrimination against hiring blacks. I suppose that's what it means. The urban slums, inhabited by a much greater percentage of blacks than whites, and blacks in the United States today are more highly urbanized than whites, impose living conditions reminiscent of the worst phases of industrialization, and all the more intolerable because they are no longer a part of economic growth, but a vestigial reminder of an age which America is increasingly leaving behind. Nevertheless, here too, economic growth and the appearance of new social values make accelerating progress visible. The obvious breakthroughs have been on the legal level of civil rights, especially in education and housing, but they have also taken place on the economic level. In 1961, 56% of American blacks were classified as poor, but by 1969, the figure had dropped to 33%. In 1956, only 9% of Negro families had incomes of more than $7,000, but by 1968, this had grown to 28%, and the median income of a black family was $5,360. Between 1960 and 1966, the number of blacks in professional, technical, and managerial jobs doubled, and substandard housing occupied by blacks dropped from 40% to 24% in 1968. According to a Gallup poll, between 1963 and 1969, the number of blacks expressing satisfaction with their jobs increased from 54% to 76%, and the number of those blacks satisfied with their housing rose from 43% to 50%. Not bad at all. Extensive change is also taking place in America's overall cultural life. Increased education, greater leisure, and perhaps an unconscious reaction to the danger that technology could breed cultural emptiness have led to a heightened interest in music, drama, and the visual arts. So is he sort of referring to, the 1960s kind of cultural revolution there? I mean, the music, the drama, and the visual arts are always provided, right? They're always part of the system. They're controlled from the top down and handed to people for a specific purpose, particularly to separate young people from old people, to divide people up and make them, it's part of divide and conquer, I would say. You are handed heroes and idols to worship and stars to follow, as Alan Watt would say. And it's very little of it is grassroots and organic. It's all corporate. But continuing. This has not only involved a spurt in the construction of art centers and renewed life for American museums, but has also led to the extensive adoption of new techniques such as videotape or stereophonic sound to make easily available in the home cultural pleasures that previously required a great expenditure of time and money. In addition, closed-circuit television has opened up new opportunities for both local and even home-based university or museum-sponsored adult education. Culture and education have therefore ceased to be aristocratic privileges. They have increasingly become an option available to more and more Americans, as well as a sometimes ostentatious symbol of new opulence. So basically what he's saying there is we've rolled out all these systems of control and manipulation to many, many, many more people now. And isn't it, aren't you lucky? Aren't you lucky that you've got a television in 95% of houses? And aren't you lucky that you've got all these pop stars to follow and all these drugs to take? And aren't you lucky that you've got all these museums to go to, which who knows what falsities and lies they are perpetuating by way of the museums, right? But that, and all this education, aren't you also blessed and lucky that you have all this education that we've deigned to give you? So it's all framed as beneficial and something you got to celebrate and be proud of, that your country has given you this. But look at where it's brought you. Look at where you are today. Look at the homelessness. Look at the unemployment levels. Look at the difficulty with which young people have doing mental arithmetic, as we talked about earlier. That all of this has brought us to where we are today. Now, he's spinning it, he's selling it as benefits and bonuses and nice must-have type plus good. But with the benefit of the 55 years since the book was published, we can see that it was all planned, part of the goal to bring us to where we are today, I think. But continuing, economic progress and elevated social expectations have precipitated an influx into colleges and universities of large numbers of young people from families with no previous background of higher education. So it's really like government indoctrination for all. Of the some 4.3 million family-supported college students in 1966, 63% came from homes in which the head of the family had never completed a single year in college. More striking still is the fact that 30%, or almost one half, of the above 63% came from homes in which the head of the family had not had even 4 years of high school. During 1963 to 1969, the number of male blacks who had completed a high school education increased from 36 to 60%. The number of those who had obtained college degrees almost doubled in just 2 years, from 4% in 1963 to 7.5% in 1965. As of the late 60s, 83% of 16 to 17-year-old black Americans were still in school, and the proportion going to college was higher than that for the same age bracket in Western Europe. So it's all standardization. To the extent that higher education has become the most important means of social advancement in America, the above figures are evidence of potentially significant upward movement. Potentially significant upward movement. Thus, as of 1969, really, this was a way to keep all the young people occupied so that they wouldn't grow up, because you go to school and you don't get anything useful or applicable to life. Then you go to university and you don't get anything useful or applicable to life. And then you come out of university on the other side, you're massively in debt. You have no idea how to make money or be useful or make an offer and bring it to the market or start a business. And you're left floundering. And then there's all the competition for the bullshit jobs that are available. See David Graeber's book, Bullshit Jobs. And you can't move out because the price of housing has skyrocketed. So you're living at home with your parents still. And also you've been indoctrinated with environmentalism. So you don't want to get married and have children. You don't want to, because the children are the worst thing you can do for our precious environment. And, when you've got people like Aurelio Pache from the Club of Rome writing in his book things such as, let me find it. Let me see, where is it? The cancerous growth of population. Yes, that is a section in the book. Apparently, it's an aberrant behavior of our species, having children. And we can describe it as cancerous. Yeah, that's Aurelio Pache, the president of the Club of Rome, in his book 100 Pages for the Future. So you got these think tanks, these powerful think tanks, indoctrinating children with this environmentalist view on the world, pricing them out of ever owning anything because the plan is that you'll own nothing and be happy, and then making sure they're totally de-skilled and defanged and ineffective and bumbling and kind of childlike into their later years, which is a big growth. But it is something that I feel has affected me. I certainly don't feel like I am competent, as competent as I should be at my age. I have a lot to learn, for sure. And I think that's part of the system. It's this never-ending childhood now. You can play with your toys and play your computer games and escape into your favorite television shows, and you can slap your keyboard all day and be told, oh yeah, that's work. And you don't even know how to change a light bulb or fix a leak under the sink, or change the oil in your car, or even drive a car in a lot of cases if you're a city dweller. And it's gross what's been done to us by way of funneling so many people into the education system, the quote-unquote education system. So these numbers are nothing to be proud of, unless you are speaking to the controllers and you are boasting about, oh, how well we've done, getting everyone into debt, getting all the young people hopeless getting them unable to think critically, and getting their awareness of reality so distorted and disfigured that they really have no idea what is going on. And they'll probably never be able to dig themselves out of that hole. I think that's another part of it too. So great numbers from that point of view. Thus, continuing. As of 1969, some 37% of all college students came from blue-collar service or farm families. Right, so people, families that actually had skills, skilled workers. People could repair things or build things or create things using their hands, using their knowledge of how to manipulate materials and put things together. We'll get all their offspring into schools and make sure that skill sharing that goes on from generation and gets passed on from father to son, mother to daughter, make sure that's totally interrupted and interfere with that. So make sure the young people are not learning anything from their parents, especially the farmers, because we want to take over the means of production when it comes to food, and we want to make sure that becomes centralized and controlled by our buddies in the agribusiness sector. Continuing. Educational background and intellectual scientific achievement are increasingly becoming the measure of social worth. This development is of particular importance to race relations. Neither the huckster's shortcut nor the Horatio Alger story offers much incentive or promise to millions of young blacks, but mass education, combined with the economy's expanded needs, does provide a wide channel for satisfying individual ambitions on a socially significant scale. Education could therefore serve as the point of departure for attaining a socially egalitarian and politically democratic multiracial society. The attainment of such a society would be a historic victory for mankind. But the brutal fact is that race relations are most vulnerable to the irrational forces of human motivation, the visual, instinctive, exclusivistic selection that operates almost automatically on the racial front. Frank says, it's arrogant to believe you know everything. We are learning until the day we die. Ain't that the truth? Every day is a school day. I agree with that. But I also think there are certain things that are useful to know that young people could be taught. I'm not against educating young people, but I do think schooling is not education in most cases. You learn a lot of trivia. It's disconnected, incoherent information. It doesn't complement each other. It doesn't lead to a holistic understanding of reality. And also you don't get taught how to learn. You don't get given a methodology of learning so that you can then follow your own instinct and curiosity in order to continue being a lifelong learner. Instead, you get sort of put through the indoctrination / education factory, and you get out the other side and they put a little black square on your head and give you a piece of paper and take a picture and say, right, well done. And then the panic sets in. And then you realize that everything you've studied and learned over the last few years is irrelevant. And you spend the rest of your life and then you just got to do more learning, really. So what do you do all that learning for? And that's not in every case, but that's in a lot of cases. Okay, and then we got this next section, which is the uncertainty of progress. But it must immediately be added that before America fully becomes such a society, indeed, in order for it to become such a society, the unassimilated legacy of industrial America, as well as the unusual problems inherent in the American transition to a technotronic society, must first be surmounted. The initially reluctant but increasingly widespread social recognition of the fact that the past has still to be settled with, even while the new is being harnessed, has created an inflammable situation that has already taken its toll and could grow worse. I should comment on this, the exclusivistic selection that operates almost automatically on the racial front. He left out a lot of his assessment there on race relations, because it's not just down to the different characteristics of the groups, right? It's also down to the manipulation of those groups by the powers that shouldn't be. There are clearly massively well-documented manipulations of minorities where they've been experimented on, where they've had drugs pushed into their communities, where they've been given really terrible role models and cultural icons to follow. And that goes for the majority group, the minority group as well. Like, different games get played against these different groups, right? And because the plan is to always keep people warring against each other, horizontally at the bottom of the pyramid, fighting with each other and scrapping and suspecting, oh, it's that group over there, or it's that group of them, people over there who've just arrived and who are unfamiliar to us. And that is the divide and conquer tactic and strategy. And so the people at the top, the oligarchy, the petrified oligarchy at the top, do this on purpose and play groups off against each other. Zbignew's not going to tell you that, though. But continuing with the uncertainty of progress. The initially reluctant, but increasingly... Oh, hang on, we just read that bit. An economic recession thwarting aroused hopes would have especially calamitous consequences for the stability of the American social order. Much clearly depends on the expanding economy's capacity to absorb and ameliorate existing tensions. Economic growth, at a relatively stable and high rate of approximately 3.5% per annum, allowing for annual variations, seems to be the sine qua non for the continued evolution of American society toward a situation in which liberty and equality will buttress but not vitiate one another. This is particularly true of poverty and race relations, in which even social good will be powerless to accomplish much in the event of a significant economic slowdown. The first victims of a recession will be the poor and the blacks, who always absorb a disproportionate amount of the suffering owing to economic malfunction. Unfortunately, it is not even certain that the relatively strong pace of economic growth in the 60s will suffice to liquidate the unfinished business of America's industrialization, both in absolute terms or relative to the growth of society at large. Indeed, what amounts to the coexistence of two rather separate American economies, the lagging and even decaying industrial economy, increasingly exposed to more effective foreign competition, highly vulnerable to cyclical swings and employing the poorer and less skilled workers, and the expanding technotronic economy, based on aerospace and other frontier industries and employing the better trained, better educated and better paid workers, has made the assimilation and upgrading of the poorer segments of American society more difficult. This gap is complicating the efforts to create a racial harmony based on both liberty and equality. The Negro should have been integrated into society during the American Industrial Revolution. Unfortunately, that revolution came before America, if not the Negro, was ready for full integration. If the black American had represented only an economic legacy of the pre-industrial age, perhaps he could have been more effectively integrated into the industrial age. But racial prejudice kept him from acquiring the necessary skills. The problem is cumulative, and today the more advanced American urban industrial regions are finding it difficult to integrate blacks, both a racial minority and America's only feudal legacy. Precisely because these regions are moving into a new and more complex phase that requires more developed social skills. Paradoxically, it can be argued that the South today stands a better long-range chance of fully integrating the blacks. American consciousness is changing. The black has awakened, and the American South is beginning to move into the industrial age. it might, if it moves rapidly enough, take the black along with it. The larger question still remains: will the pace of development be rapid enough to meet the challenge posed by the simultaneous and mutually reinforcing processes set in action by the black American's awakening and by his disillusionment with the American system? Numerous public opinion polls record the black's growing conviction that he has no choice but to opt out of the political system, to rely on exclusiveness, even on violence, as the basic means of progress. This mood was absent from the experience of white immigrant groups, which on the whole aspired to enter the American community as rapidly as possible. In contrast, many blacks see in exclusiveness and in building a separate community the only way to the future, a future that to them no longer necessarily implies an eventual merger with the larger American society. It's funny that, isn't it, when minorities don't want to integrate, does that make them racist? Are black people who don't want to assimilate into white culture, are they racist? I'm not sure. Nor is it certain that the entrance of large numbers of blacks into integrated universities will help to alleviate racial tensions. Though this development is necessary to promote full-scale participation of the black in the United States, several short-term factors point to an increase in racial tensions as a result of the increased educational opportunities for blacks. First of all, it's uncertain that black graduates will in fact obtain the positions they will feel entitled to. Secondly, this difficulty is likely to be magnified by the predisposition of some blacks to insist on separate black studies programs, not subject to prevailing academic standards, which will inevitably produce in growing numbers the American equivalent of the frustrated and badly educated pseudo-intelligentsia of the global ghettos. Finally, as the American black gains self-confidence and as his social position improves, he may temporarily be less responsive to the argument that his progress depends on cooperation with whites, and his sharpened awareness of social injustice is likely to be expressed in a more radical political posture that is indifferent to white sensitivities. The problem of race relations gives added urgency to the broader question of the place of violence in American society. White society may continue to proclaim that violence cannot build a better society, but the black will continue to see his inferior social condition as the basic reality. To the extent that violence precipitates bursts of reform designed by the white community to redress injustices, the argument that violence is necessary to black progress becomes stronger and stronger. On the other hand, this reliance on violence tends to blur the distinction, important to the functioning of any society, between political and criminal violence. Was Eldridge Cleaver a political or a criminal fugitive? I mean, that's still ongoing with the whole social justice warriors, Black Lives Matter, fiery but mostly peaceful riots. I think that's what they were called, weren't they? It's political violence, so it's okay. We have to support it and celebrate it. It prompts both legally formalized massive repressions by society at large and rationalizations of violence by the more liberal and educated segments. Either result destroys society's capacity for discriminating between the necessity for order and the imperative of change. A society's capacity for making such judgments is bound to be undermined by the degree to which it becomes psychologically inured to living with violence and to accepting violence as a means for solving its problems. That America's social history, as well as its political history, has been violent is not disputed. That America has been a more violent society than others is debatable. But the question of violence goes beyond statistics or even race relations. It involves the basic pattern of a nation's culture and the way in which a society solves its problems. Today, the problems of poverty or of race relations demand adept psychological sensitivity to nuances and restraint in balancing many complex and competing individual and group rights. This is a point which many impatient reformers overlook. The assimilation of any ethnically or racially distinctive group into the majority culture is possible only in a context of stable institutions and values expressed in orderly procedures. It is possible to maintain majority domination by violence or to reverse the power relations between races by violent revolution. But to create harmonious race relations, a society must be conditioned to accept change peacefully and to resolve social issues non-violently. So, social conditioning is the only way to make the multicultural society possible. As a footnote here, this is not to deny that violence did play a constructive social role at different stages of history. In overthrowing tyranny or in defying exploitation, violence has often acted as history's scalpel. The exaltation of historical violence should not, however, be carried too far. Barrington Moore, in his Social Origins of Dictatorship and Democracy, suggests that the physical cost of revolutionary regimes should not be held against them, for the absence of a revolution might have been even more costly. He does not, however, examine the possibility that the reforms undertaken by revolutionary regimes, often with monstrous brutality, might have been less physically costly if alternative schemes of reform successfully undertaken by other nations had been followed. Indeed, it can be argued that much of the violence undertaken by revolutionary regimes was in fact dysfunctional to the positive tasks they had set themselves. The real comparison, therefore, should be between the physical costs of alternative ways of changing society, rather than between the cost of not changing it and the cost of changing it by very violent means. Historical judgments aside, it is noteworthy that modern man is still educated in terms that promote aggressive feelings. In the West, films and television emphasize violence, and the teaching of history stresses wars, victories, defeats, and conflict between good and bad nations. I like how he's put the good and bad in inverted commas there, right? Good and bad. This idea that it's kind of a tacit acknowledgement that, and something I've spoken about before, that it's not about good guys versus bad guys. It's always good guys versus good guys, because people don't go to war unless they think they're the good guys, or unless they have to, because the regime they're living under is going to kill them if they refuse to. But generally, I think the propaganda is we're the good guys and they're the nasty bad guys over there, and they're a threat to us and we've got to go and stop them. But I like here how he's put that in inverted commas, because it's a really childish framing of these sort of events and the history, that it's the good versus the bad. But that's still ongoing today, and that's used all the time, whether that's the political divide or the racial divide or the religious divide or whatever you want it to be. There's generally always a good and bad element to that. So continuing, these aggressive instincts are also expressed by children's games as well as by adult forms of entertainment. In communist countries, ideology similarly stimulates aggressive feelings and hostility toward evil forces, thus continuing the more fundamental dichotomies introduced by the religious tradition. Yes, classic divide and rule. You're the good guys, they're the bad guys, and they want your stuff. So let's go kill them first. Continuing. But this automatically tends to strengthen the forces that oppose change, whether these forces represent entrenched interests or more generally ingrained social or racial attitudes. A social setting in which a large part of the population comes to identify violence with change and to equate order with the absence of change is a setting in which an escalation of conflict becomes unavoidable. And I just noticed in the chat we've got Asmelia's here. Good to have you here. And glad to hear that you're using LibreOffice, the free Microsoft Office clone. Don't give your money to Microsoft. They're evil. Use LibreOffice and other free and open source software options, otherwise known as FOSS, F-O-S-S. Okay, The next section is one that I am very interested in. And then it'll bring us to the end of this section. It's called The Futility of Politics. So Zbigniew Brzezinski himself, advisor to the president, is going to explain why politics is futile. Maybe. Let's see. The responsiveness of political institutions to the need for change is of great import to America's future. Some citizens see the present American system as incapable not only of promoting the needed social changes, but even of reacting to pressure on behalf of such changes. In such a setting, procedures and institutions that in times of stability are vaunted for their deliberateness become in times of more rapid change examples of delay, inefficiency, and even fundamental injustice. There is a gigantic footnote for this fundamental injustice point. Let's have a look at it. American justice is a particularly glaring example. It is as antiquated as it is often absurd. It appears to have benefited neither by the legal reforms carried out decades ago in Europe, nor even by the English pattern of relatively swift justice. Its extraordinary, cumbersome procedures, dominated by theatrical stratagems and showmanship, and involving lengthy and complex appeals, lead to delays and even occasionally to results that defy the most elementary concepts of justice. The trial of Martin Luther King's killer, during which period Ray's lawyers competed in selling his memoirs, was a travesty. Sirhan's protracted show in Los Angeles was hardly dictated by the needs of abstract justice. Highly paid, quote, exclusives by the killers of Sharon Tate were a disgrace. Soviet secret trials are certainly deplorable, but are American judicial circuses really needed to protect the defendant and render fair judgment? I'm thinking as well of what he's talking about, American judicial circuses. That's a great word for it. These like show trials that they put on TV as well, you know, with Alex Jones and Johnny Depp, and turning it into this spectacle of reality television programming. It really is a show. Continuing. At the same time, the intermeshing of private and public interests, exemplified by the outside economic interests of congressmen and senators, reinforces many Americans' inclination to dismiss the political process as dominated by inherently conservative, socially unresponsive, profit-oriented interests. For example, 8 members of the House Commerce Committee have financial interests in railroads, airlines, radio stations, and moving companies, all of which come under their legislative purview. 90 members of the House, including 12 on the Banking Committee, have interests in banks, savings and loan associations, or bank holding companies. 77 members, including 19 on the Judiciary Committee, maintain private law practices. 44 members have interests in oil or gas companies, and so on. That was reported in the New York Times, presumably back when it actually used to do some good reporting. But yes, it's a revolving door. They look out for their own interests. They belong to a class of people that most of those who are affected by their decisions do not belong to, right? They don't have anything in common with you and me, the little guy in the street here. They have stuff in common with their buddies, the guys at the golf clubs, the guys with the funny handshakes. They're the people who belong to their groups and clubs and societies. And that's not us. Therefore, how can they represent us? They don't. They represent themselves. This is obvious. And Brzezinski told you in the 70s, didn't stop people turning up to put an X in a box every 4 years for the last 55 years, though, did it? Right, let's continue. The government, as an expression of the national will, increasingly... Sorry, it's just a funny concept that the government expresses the national will. Increasingly tends to be seen as unable to direct and coordinate national change effectively. It appears neither to articulate national goals nor to develop a sense of national direction. This feeling of uncertainty about national purpose is also magnified by the fading of the established political elite that has guided the nation since World War II, primarily composed of men coming from the eastern seaboard and connected with legal, corporate, and high financial circles, the political elite provided a sense of continuity within the framework of a pragmatic liberal consensus on the nature and character of modern industrial society. The relative stability of the late 1940s and the 1950s reflected that consensus. Lately, this elite has come under increasing challenge, both from the newer, geographically more dispersed economic interests associated with the new scientific defense and frontier industries, and from the more ideologically inclined intellectual forces, which are becoming more influential. This ideologically inclined intellectual forces and also the scientific defense frontier industries. It's kind of foreshadowing where we are now, right? With Elon Musk. With Elon Musk heading up DOGE, and then also with the young students of the world going on rampages in cities and smashing things up and throwing bricks around and setting fire to small businesses and whatnot with impunity, it seems. Continuing, the breakup of the post-war elite highlights the dichotomy between the qualities necessary to gain political power in American democracy and those necessary to exercise effective leadership of that democracy. The courtship of the press and the mass media is a necessary concomitant of courting the masses, since the masses are influenced not only by direct appeal, but also through the intermediary of an image, which is in part built up by the media themselves. The desirability of this image puts a premium on advocating the immediately popular and the fashionable, rather than on formulating broader objectives by focusing attention on basic philosophical questions concerning the meaning of modern society. Since social consensus has been fragmented by the pace of change, and society's value structure has itself become highly tactical, the larger strategic questions tend to be obscured. So, you're just getting what's popular and fashionable through your TV. But again, that's because the purpose of it is to control minds and distract people and keep people just basically on the hamster wheel of content consumption, which has been put into hyperdrive since the rollout of the glowing rectangles of death. To make matters worse, the American institutional framework has not kept up with the pace of societal change, given the country's enormous transformation through industrial growth and communications mobility. Its federal arrangements have become increasingly devoid of economic or geographic substance. These arrangements are kept alive by local traditional sentiment and vested interests, rather than by their actual functional utility. That's interesting, isn't it? These arrangements are kept alive by local traditional sentiment and vested interests. He's talking there about federal arrangements. The price of this has primarily been paid to the new big cities, for whose growth the constitutional structure made little allowance, and which have consequently been deprived of the means of coping with their dilemmas. The national government, particularly because of the two-party system, has also found it difficult to develop the needed mechanisms for openly channeling the new major competitive forces on the political scene, and it still operates as if the political game revolved around the two relatively loose alliances of interest groups that largely reflected the industrial-rural dilemmas of the earlier age. In general, that arrangement had been effective in expressing as well as moderating the popular will, and in striking a balance between continuity and change. Nonetheless, it is worth noting that in past times of stress and sharper choices, the two-party system occasionally broke up, though only temporarily. It would appear that the breakup of the two-party system is again underway, precisely because the dilemmas of the country have become intensified by the extraordinary pace of change and by the widening spectrum of often incompatible choices it stimulates. As a result, the industrial-rural or liberal-conservative framework no longer adequately encompasses existing competitive political forces. The agrarian, conservative, anti-communist, and largely congressionally based bastion, The new industrial military scientific conglomerates that uneasily collaborate with the former on political ideological grounds but are in conflict with it in terms of economic thrust, and the emerging, very loose, welfare civil rights intellectual coalition that shares some of the second's socio-economic dynamics but is in basic conflict with both the first and the second in the matter of priorities. The two latter forces have operated largely outside of direct participation in the legislative process of the country, and so reflect the degree to which the representative aspects of American democracy have failed to keep up with social change. Well, you heard it here first. Zbigniew Brzezinski, The Futility of Politics. That's an interesting one to tell to your friends and family members who still believe in the power of the vote, right? Zbigniew told you back in the 70s that it's futile. There's a footnote. Let's have a look at it. The heavy representation of small-town lawyers is symptomatic of this condition. In contrast, the First National Assembly of France's Fifth Republic contained 67 professors and teachers, 48 medical men, 45 high professional civil servants, 34 lawyers, 32 workers, 27 businessmen, 25 scientists and engineers, 20 journalists, and a partridge in a pear tree. It is evident that from a representative standpoint, the French Assembly more accurately reflected the character of a relatively modern society. The benefits of greater scientific competence in society's representative bodies are beginning to be recognized in Britain. So we can all vote Partridge for next president of the USA. Back to the text, continuing, he says, several political sub-Americas thus coexist uneasily. Political sub-Americas, all right. That's kind of like the idea of multi-monoculture, right? We don't have a multicultural society. We have a multi-monocultural society where there are multiple cultures here, but they aren't mixed. There's one over there and there's one over there, and certain areas become homogenous, even though there are different cultures in different areas. Excuse me a second. I'm going to have to blow my nose again. So you've got these political sub-Americas, none of whom feel represented by the two-party system. But that system was never put there to actually represent people or give you any kind of voice, or certainly not to represent the will, the will of the people. Come on, that's there as a Punch and Judy show. It's there as a distraction. It's literally shadows on the cave wall, because they're all actors, puppets, puppeticians with scripts to read for you to argue about and fight over and be disgusted by. When the real people, the real owners, the real controllers are just continuing, rolling out their plans unheeded, unchallenged, and for the most part, unknown. So let's redo that bit. Several political sub-Americas thus coexist uneasily, and though America is beginning to think of itself as an entity, each sub-America tends to project onto the whole its own perception of American reality. The relationship between these sub-Americas is therefore tense. Each tends to seek its own political expression rather than to merge in the larger whole. In the 1968 presidential contest, Robert Kennedy personified the politics of anxiety, passionately articulating the grievances of the underprivileged, even though he shared the fears and uncertainties of established Americans who sensed and desired major change but did not quite know what that change ought to be. Eugene McCarthy was the petulant spokesman of the politics of nostalgia, lackadaisically promising to take down the fences around the White House lawn, responding to the suburbanites' desire for a pastoral life and for social justice, provided the latter is implemented at a distance from them. Hubert Humphrey preached the politics of compromise between classes and races, and his passion evoked the class conflict atmosphere of the New Deal. George Wallace expressed the politics of resentment, speaking for those Americans who felt that much of the social and racial progress was being promoted at their expense by Americans who were more comfortably established. Richard Nixon practiced the politics of caution, and he won because significant numbers of Americans from the several sub-Americas became fearful that their America was endangered and were uncertain as to what the new America might hold in store for them. I actually enjoyed that section. It reminds me a little bit of the section where he went through the different phases or possibilities for the USSR. It's like that wargaming, that scenario, and that is just that high-level overview of, okay, these are the different characters that we're going to provide to people. This section of the population is going to identify with that person over there, and this one with that one, and the speeches are designed to appeal to these different groups. And they know which words and which concerns, because they're gathering all that information, and these days they're gathering it on hyperdrive with all the technology, right? But back then it probably would have been, I don't know, spies or polls or opinion pieces in newspapers or like questionnaires that get sent out, or the buying patterns of different people and the products and magazines that get sold, or the products that get sold, and all that kind of data. They were still gathering it all. And then they provide the hero to that group of people, and they know even how when one group is too big that it can't be ignored, they got to break it down, right, into smaller groups. And so this is how you get a kind of a third option occasionally from time to time pops up, and that's to divide a vote down the middle, because you might have this large cohort who are kind of unified and getting organized, and you need to break them up a little bit. So you find a dividing line, separate them, and provide one hero for one half and another hero for the other half. And it's just divide and conquer all the way down, because they know people, they know psychology, they know groupthink, group dynamics, they know individual dynamics, they know what your concerns are, because they've built and designed and controlled the system that you're living in. So they know that you're worried about the price of eggs or meat or butter or sugar, right? They know that you're worried about the cost of gas or electricity or petrol or diesel or something, because that's all been set and on purpose, deliberately, by people who do that, right? It's not just the hidden hand of the market and the economy is just running on its own and things are just happening and all this, the millions of decisions made by the purchasers just lead to this kind of force that cannot be controlled or predicted, or no, it's all managed and planned and designed deliberately. And that was quite another just good insight into the very high level. Like that kind of report there might have been given to the real owners of the country, right? Maybe the bankers or whoever they might be. Like, okay, these are the people that we're going to run at this election. That's kind of like your executive summary. And then you find the candidates and you train them and you coach them and you write their speeches for them and you design the slogans and you manage their campaigns and you put them out on the trail and you organize all their speaking engagements and whatnot. All manipulated, all done by social engineers, all done by PR people, your kind of Edward Bernays type acolytes and professionals. It's just a good high level overview of the way these kinds of world controllers and social engineers think, in my opinion. Excuse me. Continuing. This inclination to stress personal interests reflected the impotence felt by some constituencies concerning the shaping of national policy. Many citizens sensed change, but felt that they had little control over it. In a time of relative continuity, presidential and congressional elections served as an acceptable and personally satisfying method of expressing a highly generalized political preference. In a time of discontinuity and increasingly fragmented consensus, national election campaigns became a less adequate form for expressing the popular will. The presidential election, especially given the importance television confers on personal looks and style, and that again, that's talked about in the 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. He says in that book, he's like, doesn't matter. I think it's also in Brave New World Revisited, Aldous Huxley. The content of the speeches doesn't matter anymore. Now it's all about how they look. What is the style and what is the personal looks and the style. Because it's visual, right? It's not just, you're not just listening to it on the radio, listening to the speeches and it's just the words and the content and the delivery. Now you're seeing the person, and the visual can override what you're hearing, right? The visual just goes straight in, and you just think, that guy looks trustworthy, or he looks like me, or he's got his, his top button's undone and his tie's a bit loose and his sleeves are rolled up, and I can identify with that guy. So this is when things get dumbed down a certain degree, because the visual aspect is so prominent and emphasized by the screens. These choices are instead made incrementally by administrative fiat or in congressional committees. Since both these processes are largely removed from public view, they are more responsive to influences from the various special interests with which administrators or congressmen are often in close relationship than they are to the voters. There you go. That's your special interest. That's who they really work for. That's who they really represent. And that's who they are really concerned about pleasing. Certainly not me and you. Or you and I. You and me. Me and you. You and I and you. Certainly not me. You and me. I think it's you and me in that case. Continuing. Related to this situation is the oft-noted remoteness, complexity, and impersonality of both public and private institutions. As the old traditional affiliations of the agrarian society crumbled, or, you could say were destroyed deliberately, the industrial age produced its equivalents through unions and professional societies. But unions are no longer vital institutions, and the atomization of modern life accentuates the citizens' feelings of impotence. Social institutions appear to provide neither an outlet for individual idealism nor a rapid response to collective demands. Moreover, the state or a big private organization inescapably schematizes social dilemmas in order to cope with their complexities. Though this schematization permits a large-scale response, it frequently conflicts with the individually felt dimensions of the same problem, and therefore limits the individual's freedom, even as it fails to perceive the best solution to his problems. Thus, the more the state tries to help, the more it tends to reinforce the individual's feeling of impotence. That is a quote that you should put Zbig's name against and spread far and wide. Statism. Ideas so good they have to be mandatory. The result is paradoxical. Continuing. The situation described stimulates a more intense public interest in politics while increasing the sense of the futility of politics. It fragments national consensus while prompting louder appeals for a sense of common national direction. Finally, it simultaneously confronts the individual with the twin dangers of fragmentation and of excessive control. Indeed, national policy seems to fragment as national government expands. As a result, many Americans feel that their freedom is contracting. Yeah, that's just a feeling. Don't trust your lying feelings, though. Don't trust your lying eyes either. This feeling seems to be connected with their loss of purpose, since freedom implies choice of action, and action requires an awareness of goals. If America's present transition to the technotronic age does not result in personally satisfying achievements, the next phase could be one of sullen withdrawal from social and political involvement. Are we there? I think that makes me think of Japan, where you've got these young people just checking out, staying at home, playing computer games, not getting involved, not doing anything, sullen withdrawal. But I think in America, you got more of that social justice warrior, the kind of attitude where people are engaged in politics, but it's only a very extreme left politics for the most part that young people get indoctrinated into by way of, the schooling and the universities. He says, continuing, a flight from social and political responsibility through inner retreat and outward conservatism. In the meantime, The scientific and technological revolution, itself so basically cerebral in character, still tends to affect American society in a largely unplanned fashion. Yeah, sure it's unplanned. Sure. That is determined by decisions and impulses reflecting the values and interests of the earlier America. Intellectual power is mobilized to answer how, but not to ask why. America consequently risks becoming a civilization committed to the quest for continually improved means to carelessly examined ends. That's a pretty good quote. Should we find out where that's from? That's footnote 27, which is from the introduction to The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul, isn't it? There you go, a good quote from Jacques Ellul. I'll read it again. America risks becoming a civilization committed to the quest for continually improved means to carelessly examined ends. The political system has still to develop mechanisms and procedures to raise and answer the second question, matters that fundamentally affect the national way of life, such as the construction of a supersonic aircraft, or that pose an ecological as well as a human threat, such as industrial pollution or radiation from atomic energy plants, are handled by a decision-making process that inhibits the opportunities for an intelligent expression of the popular will. According to the National Science Foundation's 17th annual report, less than 5% of the more than 200,000 scientists and engineers employed by the federal government in 1967 were concerned with social or psychological disciplines. Moreover, according to the 1963 report of the Council of Economic Advisers, defense, space, and energy research were absorbing approximately 2/3 of the scientists working on the nation's scientific and technological frontiers. In addition, our society devotes relatively limited resources to a systematic concern with social problems, while it devotes enormous resources to economic, technical, and scientific matters. Even higher education, by not focusing on the underlying questions but by emphasizing techniques, runs the risk of becoming miseducation, of creating large numbers of, quote, educated people who think they know the answers, but who in fact do not even know the truly important questions. That is another good quote to describe the state of the government indoctrination centers. It churns out all these people who are extremely confident in themselves. And they walk around with banners and placards saying, "Smash the patriarchy." And they dye their hair pink and blue. And call themselves communists as well. The Third American Revolution highlights the sharp contrast between our technical success and our social failure, and it raises basic questions concerning the control and direction of the thrust of technological innovation. How are choices made? Why are they made? By whom are they made? What values are involved in these choices, and how can they be crystallized so that a coherent policy can be shaped? These questions increasingly beset all modern societies, but given the extensive social scope of contemporary American science and technology, this challenge is especially important in the United States because it affects and potentially threatens the most intimate aspects of American life. Since it appears true that this society has chosen to emphasize technological change as its chief mode of creative expression and basis for economic growth. Yeah, like it was, I like how he says things like that. This society has chosen. Yeah, sure. It was people, it was like, what is the society? Didn't Margaret Thatcher tell us there's no such thing as society? And again, that's always just hiding, occulting the fact that it's being done to the society, to the people who live there. It's by design. It's the plan. But no, it's just, we just chose to do it en masse. The collective consciousness just chose to do this. Anyway, continuing. It follows that this society's most imperative task is to define a conceptual framework in which technological change can be given meaningful and humane ends. Unless this is done, there is the real danger that by remaining directionless, the Third American Revolution, so pregnant with possibilities for individual creativity and fulfillment, can become socially destructive. That's the end of Part 4, Chapter 1. There was a table here that I glossed over. And it's table 13, and it's annual budget in millions of dollars. Where's the money going? Well, it's going to... Oh, this is the, I guess, the budget of the companies versus the budget of the government. Maybe something like that. I'm not sure. It's there on the screen anyway, if you want to have a look at it. Also on the left, you've got like General Motors, Ford, Standard Oil. These are huge budgets. 12 billion, 20 billion, 7 billion, these kind of numbers. IBM, 4.25 billion. That's it, the industry. The budgets are enormous in industry. And then in, this is physical health. So you've got the American Cancer Society, the National Institute of Neurology, Arthritis, etc. These are tiny budgets. And then underneath you got social and psychological, and it's even less. So all the money on all the budget is really in the industry and these massive corporations. And then when it comes to social well-being, psychological well-being, and physical well-being, diminishing tiny budgets, not much money going into that. Why could that be? Must be by accident. We need to vote harder, ladies and gentlemen. So that is the end of Part 4, Chapter 1. And on our next reading, we will be reading The New Left Reaction. We'll be getting Zbigniew Brzezinski's take on the New Left back in the 60s? Back in the 60s and 70s. It's going to be a good read, I think. So I enjoyed this last one. I particularly was kind of surprised, but half surprised and half not that he called politics futile. I think this boy is like he's telling it as it is, at least in that respect. That's the kind of admission for behind closed doors. That's like the quiet part out loud, really. That's the kind of thing that I think, when the national security, I mean, he wasn't national security advisor to the president when he wrote this, but he was, I think, very soon after. I think I'm right in saying that. I think he wrote this first. Then he became the NSA, the national security advisor. But for him to be writing in his book, oh yeah, politics is just really futile, pointless. It's what did he say? There's hidden interests, not hidden. Yes, special interests who really have more influence than the voters, right? And for him to do that sweeping overview as well of all the different candidates and who they appeal to and the rhetoric that they were employing on the circuit. That's really a quiet part out loud moment from my point of view. And probably why he was seen as such a promising candidate for collaboration with David Rockefeller in the formation of the Trilateral Commission. He's like, oh, this Brzezinski is cotton onto and revealing the fact that politics is a complete charade. Let's bring him in to where the real control exists, the think tanks and these private institutions and organizations, which are made up of very wealthy industrialists, very influential thinkers, academics, scientists, behaviorists. But you don't vote for them. That's the point. Because voting is just a kind of a religious, at this point, it's just a sort of empty thing that people do religiously. It's performative. And it's the thinnest of thin illusions. And people think it's the greatest system ever devised and that they're being heard and having their say in how the country is run and the direction it's going to go. It's quite staggering, really. We had a few comments, and I'll see if I can go back to pick up on something here. Melissa says, last year I was at the Universe City Library and the librarian was bragging they were weeding all their microfiche. Microfiche. Fiche? I'm not even sure how you pronounce that word. That is sad. Heidi says, soon they will only get a badge on their digital ID. Well, that is the way it's going, isn't it? Tammy says, I can't find any books that are mentioned here or by Alan Watt in the library anyway. I'm not surprised at that. I'm sure they were removed long ago. Melissa says, it will soon be dangerous to ask for such books. What's wrong with the AI summaries? Yeah, I do feel like it's a bit like that. It's going to be like, the Bill Hicks joke. What are you reading for? Don't you know there's AI summaries out there? What are you reading for? You can get Grok to explain that. Asmelia says, the Christmas fair has been cancelled because of a yellow or red weather warning. Since when has the UK stopped stuff because of rain? Well, this is just part of the environmentalism con, isn't it? But I remember when they redid the colouring of the temperature on the maps. And so there was a great side-by-side from a weather report, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, and a weather report recently, and they were showing exactly the same temperatures, only the recent ones, they'd colored the whole map in these scary yellow, orange, and red colors, and in the 5-10 year ago one, it was just green. And it was exactly the same temperatures, but they just colored it in red to make people scared and alarmed. So yeah, yellow, they're coding these things. They are making people worried and paranoid, and they're going to say, well, it's global climate warming change, and we need to pay more taxes, and we need to put a price on carbon. I think Mark Carney just came out and said that there needs to be a price on carbon, and they're already putting it on your products in the supermarket, the carbon footprint. They're already putting it on your plane tickets, right? This ticket produces so many kilograms of CO2. So it's just another nudge, Asmelia. It's another nudge from the nudge unit, and to get people having these conversations and talking about it and normalizing it. That's what I think it is. Frank says it's FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There is another very good acronym for today. We've had a good day for acronyms, haven't we? So there you are. That is about it for today's reading of Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. We're doing well. We're on page 222, which means we have, let's just work this out quickly. We've got about 80 pages left, and then we're done. We've got about 90 pages left, in fact. So we'll probably polish this off in the next, I don't know, there's some massive footnotes coming up. 3, if not 4 sessions, I think we'll get this done. And then we will be on to Foundations, Their Power and Influence. From my point of view, I've said it before, I think this book is one to read and reread. There's a lot in there, and he's talking about a lot of things that I'm not expert enough to pick apart or challenge or contradict or know whether or not he's telling the truth. But I think he does a lot of this, like where he said society has chosen blah, 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 blah. He's really masking and hiding the true engineers of society and the systems that we live in. He's really not acknowledging that hidden hand and those, as Alan Watt would say, those ancient sciences of civilizational creation and destruction. The management. He talked here about the management and the rise of these data gathering managers, management consultants, right? But I think he doesn't acknowledge, either he doesn't know about, or he's running cover for the fact that there is a very high level of social engineering which is in play and has been for a very long time. And these highest levels, these people in the highest levels, they know exactly what they're doing at every stage of the system. And it's always about laying that path, walking people along it, making them think it's their idea, that it's natural, that it's organic, that this is the only way things could pan out. And we're at the cutting edge all the time, and we've never had it so good. Look at all the progress that we're enjoying while we're losing our humanity to the glowing rectangles of death that we're carrying around. We're losing our connection to reality, our ability to enjoy, bird song, or a quiet moment to ourselves where we just let our minds wander. Oh, imagine that. How many people can tolerate that these days? So I think there's quite a good bit of truth in here. But at the same time, he's talking about systems and societal forces kind of in a similar way that Huxley does in Brave New World Revisited, saying, he said at the start of that book, there's two forces. One's technological development and one's humans need to procreate. These are the forces that are at work. And they're just, the need to procreate. Yeah, the impersonal forces. There you go. What are these forces? I say there you go. I'm not even showing you what I'm looking at, am I? Let's get the cam back up quickly. There you go. So the Huxley way of talking about it is impersonal forces. These impersonal forces. So he's saying that these are driving us towards the Brave New Worldian nightmare. And kind of like Zbigniew says here, that the technology is just, people are just reacting to it, and it's just going where it's going. And he's hiding the fact that it's so well researched and understood and planned every step of the way that, you have to get the television first. And then from the television, you get the little remote control, and then you can control what's on it. And then you get more channels, so you get used to having all these different options. And then you get the films coming out, so you can rent the VHS cassettes, right? You can rewind it and play it and fast forward it. Now you've got the control over that temporal thing. And then the next stage is the DVDs, and now you've got even more control with all these extras, and you can change things, and you got the interactivity on that. And then the personal computer comes along, and wow, now you're on the internet and you're typing things in, and you're interacting in real time. So step by step, stage by stage, they've planned it all out. But they can't just go from no screens in your life to glowing rectangle of death in your pocket. They have to do it in increments, gradually, gradualism. That is not acknowledged by Brzezinski or Huxley, right? Neither of them. It's just an impersonal force. This drive to this development of technology, this drive to have more gadgets and gizmos. Not funded, not planned, not researched, not science of social engineering and control. Which is funny, isn't it? Because he does acknowledge in the book about the merging of technological development with the fossilized oligarchy. So he kind of, on one hand, he acknowledges that technology will be used, cybernetics and computers will be used to control people socially. But then on the other side, but then he's telling you, the technology is just, it's just evolving organically, and there's no planning behind it. So we can kind of see what he's leaving out and what he's lying about and misdirecting us with, can't we? I think, if we think a little bit about it. So there you are. That concludes today's rendition, our reading, our installment. That's the noun I'm looking for. Of Between Two Ages by Zbigniew Brzezinski. It's been lovely indeed to spend time with you this evening. I hope you've enjoyed the broadcast, and if you're watching on the replay, I'll have a pinned comment below, although it's a bit late to tell you this right now at the very end of the video. I should have told you that at the start, shouldn't I? but you're probably used to it by now. Please consider liking, sharing, supporting the video and the work, getting it out there. I've got a lot of shorts on the channels now that are shareable, easily digestible, 2-3 minutes usually. And I've tried to pick clips that are self-contained. So instead of doing the 2 to 3 hour epics every Friday, I've got these little 2 to 3 minute clips that are self-contained, but still interesting but easier to share. You've got a better chance of getting somebody you know to pay attention to one of those than you do perhaps the type of stuff we do on a Friday night. But yeah, allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. You can send me an email. You can send me a donation. I would appreciate it very much. You can sign up to the Continuity of Control email series. And you could also consider joining the community, grab all the replays, take part in our study groups, and get to know the other people who are interested in these kinds of topics and books, right? Because part of it is we get isolated, we get lonely, we feel a little bit like we are not well connected to the people around us when we learn about these sort of topics and when we care about them, when we have that intrinsic desire to know truth and we care about the bigger picture. It's not just ourselves and our immediate family. We actually care about the bigger picture of humanity as a whole, and maybe even future generations of humanity unborn and unconsidered, right? Most people are not thinking on that sort of scale. Those of us who do, we tend to study and care about these kinds of books and these bigger agendas and these points of view that are a little more high resolution. And so connecting with other people who are doing that kind of research is a fantastic way to consolidate your knowledge, to learn about other resources, to get other people's points of view, to test your views and your ideas against what other people know in a way that is mutually beneficial. So instead of it being a competition where people are arguing and trying to prove each other's wrong, and there's this sort of win-lose dynamic where it's like, I have to be right and I can only be right. Only one of us can be right. Instead of that kind of dynamic, enter into a curated space that is protected and has a win-win dynamic, right? Every interaction should be leaving both participants or all participants better off afterwards. And it's a very wonderful thing to be part of something like that. It's a breath of fresh air. It's not all combative and disagreement and conflict and all that other kind of programming that we encounter probably on a regular basis, unless you're a hermit like me and you don't go outside. So thank you for being here. Please support the show and get involved with the community. It would be great to see you and talk to you in there in real time, on a video call, in real time, voice to voice. I love seeing the chats and responding to them, but I like even more seeing faces and hearing voices and getting to know people properly. So get involved. Yeah, and you can send me an email, nick@hayesreviews.com, if you want to get in touch with anything, book recommendations, questions, suggestions. Feel free to do that as well. That would be very good. So I'm going to leave it there. It's Friday night, 9:20 on the 28th of November, 2025. I'm going to go and have a little bite to eat, and I'm going to bed. So have a wonderful evening. Have a fantastic weekend. I will see those of you in the book club on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then those of you not in the book club, I will see you on Friday for our continuation of Between Two Ages. Have a good one, everybody. Take care of yourselves and each other. Find something fulfilling and uplifting and wholesome to do that is creative, that is spontaneous, that brings you joy, and share it with somebody else, right? Maybe a kind word or a bit of encouragement to do something that maybe you've neglected, because life's serious and there's a lot of heavy stuff going on out there, but sometimes we can change gears and just, enjoy something simple and silly and fun and bring some joy and merriment into life, especially in winter when it's kind of cold and the days are short and we're dealing with yellow and red weather warnings. Find ways to bring joy and express your humanity and to share that with other people, because that is the most wonderful thing we can do, and it's the best thing we can do to push back and fight back and flex in the face of all this insanity that we are living through. So take care, everybody. It's been lovely to spend this time with you, And until next time, God bless.